It is so good to have everybody join with us today to gather with us as we, officially start 2023. We had our sharing service last week, which was very powerful. And for those that were here, why are the candles lit still? The Advent candles, why are they still lit? For those that were here last week. Glad it got communicated well. To remember what? To remember hope, joy, love, peace, and to remember that the message of Christmas is that Jesus came bringing hope, joy, peace, and love. We are to now take it. It's the work of Christmas. It's the work of spreading this gospel. So the candles are lit to remind us that what we've received, we now give. And we keep receiving. And every day, every week, as we move in community, we keep bringing hope, peace, joy, and love. One of the things that we did last week was have you share what are you asking God for in 2023? And so many prayer requests came up and cards. I still have them on my desk. I've actually been praying over them all week. I haven't given them out to the prayer team yet. And do you know what the number out of and there was a lot of them that came in. And the number one request is actually driving what we're doing today. Can you guess what the number one request was? Peace. Peace. As a pastor of this faith community, as I was going over them, the majority, over half of the cards, were for hope, and for peace and hope. And that gripped me. That really challenged me. We were going to start all in again this week. And I just felt God say, no, we have to deal with this. We have to talk about this. We have to come to a place to recognize that the peace we long for is a person that we talked about at Christmas. But I just sense that we need to look at this again as we start this year. And it actually leads into what we're going to be focusing on moving forward for the next number of weeks. How many know my complete, and I can say this word, and I have a theological foundation to say it on, hatred for winter? How many know that I just loathe it? Right? And I believe I'm theologically sound because it wasn't in the creation. All right? It's part of the fallen world. I firmly believe that. And I've got science. I got an article. I got science now to back this up. That we weren't created to live in this thing. All right. So I won't get into that.
This thing got here.
Well, I mean, I see my friend Bob and his daughter-in-law Val and son Zach. Val's a nurse. I know there are other medical professionals here. Actually, the article very quickly that the reason we get so sick in the wintertime is that because of the cold air, we lose 50% of the immunity that's built into our nasal system. So cold air is bad. but sorry, I digress. As much as I don't like winter, is this switched over, Karina? As much as I don't like winter, there is something very peaceful about it. Not what you do. Going Mach 10 on a snowmobile. But there's something very peaceful about this. When you don't have to shovel it, when you don't have to deal with it. There's something very peaceful. I find in the winter season that there is this time of peace. There is this time of rest. It's in nature. It's a time for birth to come, for new things to be happening. But it can be very peaceful. We're going to talk about peace today. We're going to talk about how we can find this peace that so many of us are looking for. You're going to be asked to do some things, though. You're going to be asked to maybe remove some things. but the peace is possible. The worship team is going to come up, and the songs that they've selected, and again, I just love how God sort of orchestrates all this. And we're going to sing some songs that just speak to who Christ is, that speak to how He needs to be, as Aaron already said, the center. If our trust isn't in Him, we can't have peace, we can't have hope, we can't have a knowledge of how to pray even in some situations. And so as we sing, I want us to just pause for a moment. I want us to collectively just have a moment of silence. And if you guys could just play quietly, just for about a minute. I just want you to meditate on this verse. Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Just say this with me. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Just take a minute now, and just where you are in silence, just meditate on that verse. It is undeniable that peace that passes all understanding is possible, because Jesus promises it. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. But the question that I have is, why is peace missing? We talked about this at Christmas time, and we talked about the word shalom, and this word shalom means wholeness. Why is shalom, wholeness, missing? Why is it that if we know that Jesus Christ is peace, and peace is a person, it's not a thing, it's not some abstract thought, peace is a person. Why do those of us who say we follow Christ still struggle with finding peace? Why is it for people who are searching in this world apart from Christ? I've just got to add this, that I don't think you'll ever find peace apart from Him. I don't think, I know, I believe you will never find peace apart from Him. But why do we struggle? There's a couple things that I want to talk about as we come into this year, and yes, it ties into moving forward as we go back to the series All In. Why is shalom missing in our lives? We have instant access. Here's one reason. We have instant access to all the anti-shalom that our ancient enemy is bringing into this world. There are many reasons that we find it hard to have peace, but I believe this is one of the biggest reasons that we struggle to have peace. And as I said earlier, as we talk about this today, I believe every one of us, myself included, are going to have to take some action today. That we're going to have to move from just, as James says, of just being hearers of the word to being doers of God's word. At some point, I have to start taking charge of the peace quotient in my life. And I believe that if I'm willing to address some of the things, that peace is possible and it is sustainable. But we have to start with just recognizing that this really plays into why a lot of us don't find peace. I mean, stop and think about this. At any time, day or night, we have instantaneous access to all this, as it says, to all this anti-peace, this anti-shalom in the world. A fact that just baffles my mind. In our world today, in a 24-hour period, we are exposed to the amount of trauma and bad news that was the equivalent of a year's worth 24 years ago. Let that land. What we have access to in a 24-hour period is equivalent to a year's worth 2 decades ago. And then we wonder why we struggle with finding peace. The world's getting smaller, but our lack of peace is growing exponentially. We are left, and then you think about all the online stuff, the social media that many of us are involved in. I am not. Where in this social media world, in this online world, you want to wonder why you don't have peace. When you stop to realize that you are left to compare our circumstances and situation with others at their very best. My limited knowledge of social media, I know that when people post stuff, they're usually posting them at their best. Look at a picture of me and my family. And then you sit and go, that's not my family. The perfect Christmas picture. And then you look at your Christmas morning, and it's nothing but perfect. It's chaotic, it's a mess, but with this online world, with this instantaneous bombardment that we have, we are left to compare our circumstances and situations with others at their very best. And we are sitting here, and it could be just like their jobs, talking about their jobs, talking about the newest thing they bought, talking about whatever, it goes on and on and on. And you're left sitting looking at your life going, I don't have a job like that. I don't have a vehicle like that. I don't have a home like that. I don't fill in the blank. Then you throw into that in this instantaneous world, we fall into this trap of being evaluated in real time. People who know you and people who don't know you form opinions about you in real time. Think about the stress, the lack of peace that brings. The reality is that there is no off button in this shrinking world. Do you know something? There used to be a time when TV stopped playing.
It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
This is something that just might actually be quite phenomenal for us to realize. There was a time that something like this would happen.
It's the end of broadcast.
Audio?
Oh God, I'm old enough to remember that.
Hands up if you remember this.
Yes!
You're dating yourself, but don't worry about it.
Mustn't have stayed up that late.
There was a time that most of us are familiar with when TV stopped broadcasting. And then you would be watching TV, all of a sudden this comes on and you know it's done. It's time to go to bed. And then you would see this off air. That actually happened, people. This actually happened. It happened, Manly. It did. It honestly did. He's too young to remember. Right? And the thing is that this actually, I Googled, I researched this, and I'm like, when did we stop ending broadcasting? The 1990s. That's really not that long ago.
For some people.
But now, for some people. Yeah. It's quite a while ago. But the thing is that there was a time when the world stopped. And it doesn't anymore. We don't use the off button. We allow ourselves, and like I say this, I am not on social media, and I'm not bragging about that. I just know me. I know when it first started, I'm like, I can't handle that. Because I know what I'll say. And then people, it'd just be a mess. I'd lose friends. Instead of connecting with friends, I'd be losing friends. But the thing is that this world of ours, and we know this, has gotten so small. And the peace, the lack of it, has increased drastically because of that very thing. And we need to pause and ask ourselves, is this one of the reasons that I do not experience peace? Because I am tuned in too much to this instant world. I have set up to get a reminder how much I'm on this thing. And I don't have social media, but I have the NFL network. I read the stories. I get the news. Do you know how much time I spent on this last week? 5 hours and 32 minutes. Over a week. I don't know.
The comment was amateur.
What's that?
The comment was
Greg says
amateur.
your name.
And I know that that's probably small, okay? Compared, I go over 7 days, 5 hours and 32 minutes. But what grips me is that's 5 hours. That's 5 hours. Gone. And has that affected my peace? One of the other things that I think we really, really need to pay attention to in 2023 is that not only are we missing shalom because of this instant world that doesn't stop and we just allow it to come and come and come and come and come, we also need to recognize that I firmly believe this. I've got to be careful because I don't want to run too much over time today. We will run over a bit because the service dragged out, but it was all good. It was all
Sorry.
good. A few weeks ago in my solitude and silence, I'm sitting in front of the fire in my family room, and God says, Steve, this world, this culture, this society is marked by symptoms of trauma. And I think PTSD, and I'm like, oh, come on, that's the veterans, that's the people that have seen horrific things, that's the frontline workers, that's the nurses, the doctors, the police officers, the firemen, the people that are just like experiencing horrific things time and time again. That's them, that's not us as a culture. And God's like, you need to pay attention to this. And so in the afternoon later, I just took some time to research trauma, symptoms. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is us. This is me. This is what we're facing in 2023. I listened to a podcast this week. I had to go to a funeral this week that was hard. I was in the Brantford area. I was on my way home and I was listening to this podcast by, Kevin, help me with his name, Carey Nieuwhof. Carey Nieuwhof. He was interviewing John Eldridge. And John Eldridge, if anybody know Wild at Heart, Waking the Dead, like just some amazing books. He's a psychologist. And so he's being interviewed about the trauma just that we are seeing. And the question was asked, is there trauma in our society? He just kind of laughed and said, yes. Like that, duh. And the thing is, and he started talking about symptoms, and the symptoms that he talked about just did this, dovetailed with the symptoms I looked at after God said, Steve, this is our world. This is your world. This is you. That you are dealing with trauma. Unprecedented. And it affects your peace. And we just need to name it. We need to realize it. We need to recognize that this is what we're in, and we need to journey through it, but peace is possible. Like some of the symptoms that, as John Eldridge was talking about, and then part of in this podcast, the thing that really gripped me was we are focused, like there's all kinds of research coming out now. It's actually mind-blowing. If you dig into it, spend some time looking around. All this research is coming out now about the effects of what we went through. But the reality is, before 2020, here's a question. How many were functioning at 100% before 2020? Thank you. Right? As a culture, in this modern culture, this overwhelmed, instantaneous, access to everything in the world culture, this achievement culture where if you're not performing, you're not functioning, you are like done. If we took time to stop and look back and say, how was I doing before the world went crazy? Most of us, research is showing us, we're probably at about 30%. When you think about what fullness is and what depletion is. We're probably functioning at about 30%. Throw into that then stress. Throw into that then the pandemic. You see, the reality is, good or bad things, stress, like a wedding is a great thing. The birth of a child is a great thing. It's wonderful stress. But when you face that stress, you will pull from the reserves that you have. Good and bad. This is what we know. So if I'm at 30% when everything was okay, and I'm pulling from reserves, and then the pandemic hits, for 2+ years, you're pulling from reserves. And then they end. And if you were at 30%, which is probably where average, some were, some might be a little better, some might be a little worse, let's say 30%. As I look back, yeah, probably 30%. And then you, for 2+ years, you're pulling the reserves empty and you just keep going. There is this cascade effect of the trauma that affects you, that affects us, that robs us of peace. And we need to know this. We need to pause and go, I need to name this because it's affecting me. You know, symptoms like irritability. Just look at what's happened on planes, right? Remember, all the stories about people going crazy on planes and getting angry and having people jumping on them like we saw them time and time again? Guess in 2019, guess how many incidents there were globally? 10 for the year. In 2021, guess how many for the year? 500. And in 2022, it went over 500. Irritability. I like to think I'm a gracious guy, you might argue. You're in the line at the grocery store. There's the express lane, 10 items, 15 items or less. And there's the individual with the shopping cart full. And I say, can you read?
Well, I can't count.
And I can extend a little bit of grace towards that. I find it really hard now. Right? It's like, as a culture, I know that there is this, just below the surface, I'm on edge. It's a sign of trauma. Forgetfulness. Trauma affects, it actually defragments your brain. So I'm really in trouble. It actually defragments your brain, and so you become forgetful. Oh, I forgot about that email you sent. I forgot you called. Oh, I forgot to go and do that. Right? That is a sign of trauma. Another sign of trauma is that you isolate and withdraw from community. That's why we're going to be talking about all in community. Because we isolate and withdraw from it. The very thing we need. The very thing that we were created for. And here's a sign of this. How many made a decision, I'll ask for a show of hands for this, but not for a show of hands what's next. How many actually made a decision to say, you know what, I need to get back into engaging in community? Maybe I won't show it. Hands up. Right? Is there anybody that didn't? Oh, so Claude and Beth, you can. I know they don't put their hands up for anything. I think we all said, you know what, I got to build, right? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands on this. In this culture that we have right now, in dealing with all this, have you ever had this happen? Like, we are very sensitive now to engaging. If I don't feel good, if I got a little bit of cough, you'll cancel stuff, right? Have you experienced this where you've set something up, you're like, okay, we're going to get together, phone call comes, I have to cancel, and you go, I'm glad they have to cancel. It's a sign of stress. It's a sign of trauma. When you're like longing for community, but glad that you don't have to be in it. It's part of what we face. And the thing is, friends, that into all this, and I could go on, for the sake of time I'll stop. We are in this instantaneous world. We need to recognize that that affects our peace. We, as a culture, need to understand the effects of trauma that we've lived through. A lot of us want to be in denial that it didn't happen. Like traveling, like reports are, people are traveling more than ever. Oh, it's all over, it's all done, it's all good. And we're not realizing the cascading effects that this has had on us. And so like, okay, it's all in the rearview mirror. It's not. It's not in the rearview mirror. We still need to journey through this because it affects our peace. And into this, God, through His Word, speaks loudly. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The thing is, as we stop and think about this, it is so easy to say this. It is so easy to read this. It's so hard to live it. So how? This peace that passes all understanding, that will guard your heart and mind, how do we experience it? 3 things, and I'm going to try to move quickly through this. First of all, we need to recalibrate your concept of Jesus. We all need to recalibrate our concept of Jesus. Maybe not all of us, most of us. Who is Jesus to you? Is He just a historical figure? Is He just something that you learned about in Sunday school? In Sunday school, how many of us can remember the flannel board? Right? Everybody's like, what's that doing up there? Right? Everybody's like, what's he doing today? You know, like, I grew up with this, right? And you probably invented it. Oh, sorry. Sorry, not sorry. I mean, this is what we did before Hydro. But, as a kid, I remember sitting there, and I'm like, oh, here it comes. Talking about, this is the story about Jesus walking on the water. And you had the disciples out in the boat, and you're like, oh man, look at that. They just put a boat on the water. Like, and that boat is just there, and then there they are. And then the next thing you know is that this storm comes. And with the storm, you got clouds, right? You got storm clouds forming. And then with storm clouds comes the waves too, right? And they were much better at this than me. But then the waves come, right? And the waves are just wreaking havoc and all the storms going on. And then, right? And then Jesus comes walking on the water. There he is. There's Jesus, right? Walking on the water. Incredible, incredible miracle. And as a kid, you know, like this is how you knew Jesus. There he was. One-dimensional. There's Jesus. And then the story goes on, right? Peter says, Jesus, Peter, everybody's like, can I do that? And Jesus is like, sure you can. So Peter jumps out, pauses to take a selfie, and when he does, he starts to sink in the water. And he's terrified. And then Jesus comes along, picks up Peter, right? Puts Peter back in the boat.
They did do it better.
Just like, his hands extended. Praise God, praise God. Praise Jesus, you are Lord. And then we have him. There's Jesus. And as a child, your Sunday school teacher goes, do you want to be able to walk on the water?
Wait till it freezes.
And then I'd respond and they'd kick me out. And then, do you want Jesus in your heart? Right? And then we grow older. And maybe, as we grow older, Jesus goes from this flannel graph to just an image we know of. So many churches, I've seen this, you walk in the church and there's the portrait of Jesus.
Portrait.
There's the rendition, the artist's rendition, whatever. A few of the Sunday school classes that I was in had that hanging on the wall. You see it in maybe some offices. And we think we grow in who we think Jesus is. He's no longer one-dimensional, right? But now he's that. More like a historical figure. And friends, if that's all Jesus is, if he's just one-dimensional, something you learned about when you were in school, in church, as a child, if he's just a portrait on a wall, if he's just an historical figure, you won't find peace. You will not find peace. You see, Jesus is a person. We've celebrated at Christmas that he is Emmanuel, God with us. And if all he is one-dimensional or a historical figure, when the phone call rings, when the phone rings, and the bad report comes, when your spouse leaves, when tragedy comes, when someone in your family dies, if that's all Jesus is, you will not have peace. See, Jesus is, well, he's gritty. He's mighty. He's powerful. He's personable. He knows everything. Intimately aware. And if I don't know him, like even as Aaron talked about earlier, if I don't know him, I won't find peace. If Jesus isn't as real as the person sitting beside you, you won't know peace. And the thing is, I will challenge you, if you are struggling with peace, maybe, just maybe, you need to recalibrate your concept of Jesus and grow to know him so that he's as real as the person sitting beside you. The text tells us that they also have to release your concerns. Release your concerns. It says this, it says, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Because you can trust him. If Jesus is as real for you as the person sitting beside you, then you know him. And therefore, you can trust him.
Amen.
Kevin and I, when we met this week, he
Smacked you.
he hit me with that again. That if you don't trust him, if you don't know him, if you don't trust him with everything, if he's not all trustworthy, there's no peace. It's impossible. And if he's trustworthy, then you can take your concerns and say, here, please. That's what Paul is talking about here. He's like, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving. And this is, we're going to come back to this when we get into what does it mean to be all in prayer. But this is me saying, okay, God, if this is your table, if that's kind of your desk, that's the image I have, although he's not like a corporate executive sitting at a desk, but here it is. This is what I'm losing peace about. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety. This word anxiety there and here means to be pulled apart. God, this is what's pulling me apart. And I trust you. I cast on you. Because I know you. You're as real as the person sitting with me. And so I'm giving this to you. I release this to you. And it's not that you stop caring. You just stop carrying it. Big difference. Big difference. It's not that I stop caring. I stop being concerned. I stop carrying it. Jesus, you know. I trust. And I release this to you. I release this to you for you to move as you see fit when it is time. Everything in your time, not mine. And rest in that.
Sometimes we have to do it over and over.
Sometimes over and over. The other thing we have to do is replace the anxiousness with something else. You can't just stop a habit without replacing the habit. It's impossible. Every psychologist, every therapist, every trainer in the world knows this. Every life coach, everybody knows you can't stop something without replacing it. And Paul, he tells us, he says, this is what you need to replace it with. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, say it with me, think about such things. Read this with me. Start at whatever. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Replace this with what you're tempted to worry about. Replace this with what you're tempted to have you consume and take your peace away. And you know what is incredible about this? This is Jesus. It's Christ. That's who Christ is. He's true. He's noble. He's right. He's pure. He's lovely. He's admirable. He's excellent and praiseworthy. And you see, the thing is that this is so defining for us right now. That as a society, as a culture, we need to figure out how to stop some things that are robbing our peace. Because we know Him. We know Him. I remember, this just came to me. Have you ever heard I should have it up on the slide so you'd see it. N-O, no Jesus. N-O, no peace. No K-N-O-W, Jesus. No peace. Without Jesus, there's no peace. With Jesus, we can have peace. The thing that we need to do in replacing this anxiousness with someone else is that we have to start looking for a consistent way. We have to look for a consistent way to put the good things of God in our lives. And there's two things I think can do that. Guess what the first one is?
Read your Bible.
Hmm?
Read your Bible.
No? Yeah.
Aaron said.
We spent 5 weeks talking about it in September. Silence and solitude. Finding ways to replace all the stuff that robs our peace with something that fills us. Silence and solitude is crucial. The other thing is lean into community. And this is where we're heading next week. The very thing that we want to withdraw from is lean into. Find those people that are close to you, that know you, that can actually walk with you. I came across a quote this week. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You are the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. So think about the people that you spend the most time with right now. Question. Do they focus on what's true? Do they focus on what's noble? Do they focus on what's right? Do they focus on what's pure? Do they focus on what's lovely? Do they focus on what's admirable? Do they focus on what's excellent or praiseworthy? Do they? Because part of this is not only to start removing the stuff that steals from us, but leading into community that breathes life into us. And if you don't have that, can you find that? It might be making an ask. It might be being vulnerable and saying, I'm struggling with peace. Please pray. It might be a moment where some morning you just wake up and you just feel anything but shalom, and you just text and you say, I need you to help me today. I need you to help me to focus on what's true, to remind me of what's praiseworthy, to remind me of what's noble, to remind me of what's excellent. Just please do that. And it's amazing how people will respond if you ask. Because you don't have to be alone. You don't have to be alone. I'm going to ask you to stand. And as we stand today, just finally, again, at some point, you must start taking charge of the peace quotient in your life. You must take charge. Maybe it's learning to fast this. Maybe it's learning to hit the off button. Maybe it is getting back into rhythms of solitude and silence. Maybe it's leaning into community more. But whatever it is that you need to do to find peace, you need to do it because it is available. Jesus promised it. And remember, peace is a person.